So 4 years ago, I was shopping for car insurance, and I was talking to my car insurance agent, and he had suggested a few things I could do to save on my insurance bill. But then he half jokingly, now it kind of offended me that he would say this as a joke, but in his mind it was a joke. He said, "Why don't you just get married?" And he showed me on his computer how much money I could save on car insurance if I got married. He said, "Imagine your wife also drives a similar car and you insure two cars." And the bill was barely more than insuring one car. And so, in his mind, he's a much older person than I am. Getting married is second nature. He didn't think very much of it. I took very big offense at it. So later that night, I was still angry about the email, and I posted an ad on a dating website, and I said, would anybody like to get married so that the two of us could share our car insurance and get a big discount? We could save this much, right? It was a joke. I was trying to raise awareness about how we treat singles in our society. And I forgot all about that ad and went about my ways of being happily single. And a couple days later, I get a response saying, I'm interested. And I thought she was serious about this. And I asked her what kind of car she drives, how much she pays for insurance. And she tells me she doesn't even drive. And I said, well, what are you planning on driving at some point? And she wasn't. A lot of young people nowadays don't want to drive. Personally, if I had a more stable situation, I might not want to drive nearly as much, but my car has been my fallback option to live in. The pandemic has kind of changed that equation. When I do have somewhere to live, like right now, I tend not to want to drive either if I can get away with not doing it. So I can see both points of views. Now, so she said she doesn't drive, and I asked her, what are you interested about? And she said that she liked guys who can think a little bit outside the box, posting an ad to raise a little bit of awareness. And she knew that the reason for the ad was to raise awareness, not to meet somebody to then save on car insurance. She knew that. And we went to a restaurant in downtown Seattle, and I was naive. I had first of all, she all of a sudden on a Saturday afternoon, she's like, "Why don't we meet?" And I left in a hurry, and I parked in a public parking lot, and we walked to the restaurant. When we came back, my window was broken into. And I thought it was very ironic that we had met over the discussion about car insurance. I mean, the damage wasn't enough to warrant filing an insurance claim, but we met over car insurance, and then I ran into car problems. Now, the car insurance wasn't the only time I wish I could have gotten married for some kind of ulterior societal benefit. 15 years ago, when I was working on my PhD, I had gotten accepted into the program to work on a problem called computational social choice theory. But my real passion was in another problem called Ramsey theory, but there was no funding in it. I really loved it, and I wish I could retire to work full-time on Ramsey theory. And I was thinking to myself, I had 3-4 years of the PhD program. I would accumulate some precious metals, right? At the time, it seemed like the dollar was on its deathbed, or we had the global recession, we had the debt crisis. And I was thinking that, if I leave the PhD program, let's say I leave with $100,000, which I ended up doing, and I moved to a second or third world country, I could retire, right? So I wanted to marry a girl with a citizenship for a second or third world country. And I ended up meeting such a girl. Unfortunately, she wanted children. And so I didn't want to have children. I wanted to devote all my time to Ramsey theory. If it were between her and Ramsey theory, I think I love Ramsey theory more, or at least I did at the time. And that was that. Now fast forward to now the pandemic. A lot of times I don't necessarily hate the fact that other people are happily married or getting benefits from being happily married. I'm more angry at the fact that it doesn't work as a two-way street. Right? Let me give you an example. So last year, during the pandemic, the first wave of reopening for the pandemic back in summer 2020, now we had to go back to the office. I'm an adjunct professor. And my colleagues, some of them couldn't go back to the office. They didn't have child care. They had family members who suspected that they had COVID and they needed to get tested before coming back. They had an extended family member with COVID, and now they needed to take care of their children so that the parents could safely quarantine. You had all sorts of pandemic-related issues, right? They had to take on another job because their spouse lost the job, and now there's a conflict between the schedules. You know, all sorts of that kind of stuff, right? Not to mention just all the typical family issues, right? Maternity leave or children acting up, you know, their child, other issues like that, right? And so my colleagues would ask me to donate some of my paid time off so they could take care of that and still get paid. And I would have emergencies that, as a single guy, weighed much more heavily than somebody who was married. My car would break down, and I don't have a spouse to drive me to the office, and I still had to find my way to the office somehow, right? Either taking a bus. You got to remember, during the pandemic, the buses were a lot less frequent. Walking. Sometimes I'm spending a good fortune taking Uber or something like that, and I still have to problem solve all that, right? Now, the big the one situation that really angered me the most was that last winter, I only wanted one day off. I wanted to go see the Great Conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn. And it still didn't fly. I mean, I might have been able to ask my colleague if she would return one of those paid time off days that I gave her back to me. But instead, because of societal pressure, that didn't feel right. So I went there, and you got to remember, in December of 2020, you couldn't go into a Starbucks to use the restroom, and I had to pee and poop on the side of the road while I was at the Vantage Point in Ellensburg, Washington. And then I had to find Wi-Fi to connect to. I had to plug my computer into the car and work from my car. And then my car had a problem, and I had to get it fixed because of using I use a Lenovo ThinkPad, which uses up about 200 watts, and I fried the fuse in my car, and I was frantically watching YouTube videos on how to fix that. And I distinctly remember I used the last 5% of my computer's battery to watch a video on how to fix the fuse in the car, and I got it fixed. And just not a lot of dignity, right? In an ideal world, can I have 2 days off, and then I would just go to the Vantage Point, not worry about having to work there, and then I would have been back home before maybe I had to pee a few times. Certainly wouldn't have had to poop on the side of the road, right? And that's what I meant by I wish it were a two-way street, right? Yeah, take care of your children, take care of your family members with COVID. Stay home when you have COVID. You know, well, thank you for doing that. And but you know, as a single guy, sometimes my car breaks down. Sometimes I don't have somebody to cook for me. Sometimes I might not have a communicable disease, but maybe I'm feeling a little bit of back pain, and I wish I could have my favorite meal instead of spending all the time at the office and then having to resort to eating processed foods, right?